Hello people. Today will be sort of weekly review type of video, as there were so many events, each worthy of separate video and discussion, that I can't realistically review them all in details right away, but we'll get to them one after another. But today I will just underline some interesting moments of this last week that brought so much to us. First of all, there was the creation of Seattle's Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, a sort of self-proclaimed mini-leftist state or community which ironically was started by creating a wall around its controlled territory. But the most hilarious thing about this autonomous zone, which I guess is already controlled by some black rapper warlord, was its pathetic attempt, to create a food production for themselves. It was miserable and funny at the same time, so here you see pictures of their garden, or better to say their mighty anarchist socialist food production chain that would put capitalists to shame. So people who talked for decades on how their creative and altruistic spirit would break the chains of evil capitalistic system, and how it would be easy to feed all the hungry, and how only greedy bourgeoisie is standing between them and prosperity of all the mankind, these people have created these. And they were so lazy, they didn't even dig there. They just put cardboard and throw soil on it, and then just stuck in whatever they could find. Grannies at my neighborhood look like real preppers compared to these autonomous zone inhabitants, as they have much better gardens and they actually know something about plants and creating food. Anyway, this pathetic stuff reminded me about a movie called Idiocracy. It's about cultural and intellectual decline of society, and while it doesn't show all the aspects of it, it was kind of amusing anyway. But the thing is that this movie, where dumb future people would water their crops with beverage or lemonade and then wonder why nothing grows, this movie, as we can see, wasn't really about that distant future. In fact, as we are witnessing it now, degenerates who have no skills, no useful abilities, useless parasites who look down at those redneck farmers from the heights of their university Marxism genderism degrees. These people are pretty much ready to be the heroes of that movie and of the reality it describes. And it's happening today. There is no need for another 100 of years. Those idiots are among us already. It's just that we still have the healthy backbone of our nations. But the question is, how long can we last with such amount of attacks? Next thing, London riots. At those days of violent protests, I have been checking UK Prime Minister Twitter profile several times in hopes to see his reaction to the madness in London, and I had to wait really long time till something relatable had appeared there. Yeah, I mean, it's sad, hilarious, stupid, ridiculous in the same time, but the latest tweets were nothing else but COVID-19 tweets like wash your hands, wear mask, and my favorite, meet your friends and relatives in groups of no more than 6. Yeah, the whole London seemed to be following the same tweets and rules, and sure, remember to wash your hands before and after writing. And it took long time for at least something to appear on Boris Johnson's private profile, which was also filled with COVID-19 tweets and some mumbling about climate change. Unfortunately, what he has said after considerable delay, when he finally decided to address the situation, was rather toothless and weak, and very much in line of your average mainstream media. And the video he posted later was even worse, as it sounded just like something left liberal person would say, you know, typical stuff about hijacking protests and please do it peacefully and keep social distancing, and we should all fight against racism and discrimination. Nothing conservative at all, unless you are using word conservative as a derogatory word. And by the way, it's important to remember that even peaceful protest doesn't mean that it's not promoting lies and hostile agenda, and that's something we would like to hear from our so-called leaders, as they have to understand it. And when they underline peacefulness of protests as some sort of greatest virtue, it means basically that they are ignoring the destructive and hostile message itself. And that's kind of again and again brings the topic of weak conservative, fake right-wingers, spineless professional politicians, and the system that rewards spineless servants and punishes people with principles, pretty much filtering them out. And in regards of system, Britain is very interesting case, because UK as a whole is not a country that you would call lost in terms of, not being able to find any decent or strong person. There are many of them out there. Some of them were defending monuments, by the way, until police forced them to leave the place. So it's not like you could make some sort of assumption like, oh, he's from UK, so it means he's that bad. No, in fact, I have seen quite a lot of Brits who were almost inspiring with their courage, and it was even more inspiring since I knew that UK's system is totally hostile towards these brave people. So it's not like they are brave without risks, right? But UK is a strange example of a country that still has some good human material, but they have almost zero influence over the system. So if in some other countries it's more like pendulum, where good people occasionally get at least temporary control over their country, in UK it looks like no matter what party wins, no matter what referendum they got, no matter who is prime minister, the system remains equally hostile towards sane and healthy parts of society. The police remains the same, judicial system remains the same, government overreach and tyranny doesn't really retreat, as you would expect when supposedly conservative government comes to power. No, it's like the politics doesn't matter at all. It's just the system, or what some would call a deep state, that keeps all its achievements. And it's kind of ironic, as Brits had all those writers writing about different types of totalitarian system, like Orwell described brutal totalitarianisms, and Aldous Huxley described some sort of conditioning into pleasant obedience. And in fact, both methods are used against Brits. And this happens while they still have good and strong people, right? A lot of degenerates and hostile immigrants as well, but it's not like everything is lost, okay? In fact, I believe that if sane Brits would abandon the idea of UK and just carve out part of it for themselves, they could easily get a population of tens of millions. Yeah, it would be less than all the multicultural UK, of course, but it still would be on their level of significant European country in regards of population and its potential. But it's the trickiest part, right? Because we are all bound by our hopes to defend everything and everywhere, even though we could get a better deal by concentrating our efforts on something smaller and achievable. Anyway, next thing I stumbled upon was hilariously Orwellian BBC with its BS, like 27 police officers were injured during largely peaceful anti-racism protests in London. Yeah, I guess then we should describe home invasion like this: one person killed and one person raped during largely peaceful home visit from local mosque community. Why not? And then there was like this ridiculous stuff about police officer knocking herself from her horse. Yeah, well, coming from the creators of trucks committing acts of terror and acid being out of control. Those nasty trucks, acid, and self-hurting police officers. Gotta be careful, lads. Which way you stepping? I don't know. Well, then there is this hot police topic: solidarity or hate. And I know, especially British police, they are loved and they never did anything wrong and they are highly respected professionals. But seriously, In fact, it's rather situational. Sometimes you will be dealing with pretty much armed multiculturalism enforcers. Sometimes you will have just people not caring about anything but their paycheck. And sometimes you might get lucky and your local police force is actually decent or reluctant to enforce tyranny upon citizens. And your attitude, as well as your approach to them, to the methods you will be using to build relations with them, will be very different in every such case. If they are hostile, you might want them to become even more degenerate, filled with females. Support them in their aspirations to become cocks and clowns, because when time comes, you will have one less problem to worry about. However, if your local police force is more or less loyal to your community or even has nationalists and patriots in their ranks, it might be a different story. An informational policy you will be using towards them should be built upon strengthening their ties with your community while weakening their ties with central government. And then you would meet leftist influence with aggressive attitude and resistance. And you have to understand, lefties won't keep the degenerate force forever. As soon as they will have full control, as soon as they will see that they may forge police as they wish, without any interference, they will without doubt change it to something more like Soviet or Chinese police, with enough brutality and discipline to serve them. Maybe filling it with immigrants ready to terrorize locals at the beginning. So in any case, current situation is temporary and both parties will act differently depending on the stage of the process or depending on their evaluation of policy loyalty or their control over it, etc. The next thing was this sort of very artificial type of events held across some countries where people who had nothing to do with America, blacks or cops, had held demonstrations against American police and racism. In China it was organized by government, in Europe it was organized by networks of NGOs, Antifa, local leftist parties, with the support of media. And these European protests looked especially stupid, as there were basically two types of absurdity on a display. In Western Europe you had lunatics who were ignoring lawlessness of their own countries, their own stockpiling problems, while rooting for some dubious American organizations and movements. And in Eastern Europe you don't have multiculturalism, and therefore these events were either miserable with low amount of participants, or it was just like freak show where all the possible types of clowns gathered together just to remind about their existence to their sponsors. Also, one interesting thing, in Poland, in the city of Krakow, I believe, there was a small demonstration in support of Black Lives Matter movement, and what caught my attention was an obvious disbalance in gender among those so-called protesters, as majority of them were females. And you know, it's kind of telling that even in a country that is not hopelessly brainwashed, women are pretty much the first to become manipulated. It serves as a quick reminder that equal rights, especially political rights, was a huge mistake or a huge win for socialism, as for the power that strives to find more victims for manipulation. Another, quite ironic, up to the point of imitating satire, was the case of Somalian woman who, for some weird reason, is serving as American congressman, demanding dismantling of police force of Minneapolis. And the funniest thing here is that I remember a lot of discussions where libertarians and ANCAPs were facing this argument that if society follows their ideas, then it would be just like in Somalia. And then we have this Somalian through Western statist system is turning part of America into Somalia. You can't make this up. Instead of post-apocalyptical scenario of anarcho-capitalism, we got this absurd and depressing late Rome tragedy style. I also wanted to share with you this hilarious tweet I stumbled upon from some bleeding hard-brained dead liberal. Just listen to this. It's hacking time for us white liberal men to stand up for our brothers and sisters. Borrow your dad's hunting rifles and go nose to nose with Trump's gang of misfit tools. Oh my. Borrow your dad's rifle, borrow your mom's scarf, and start a revolution. Anyway, that's probably it. I won't explain to you absurdity of kneeling and appeasing, as I am pretty much sure that you guys don't need this advice, and those who need it, they have serious problem that won't go away with friendly advice anyway. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, subscribe, press notification bell, share this video on your social network, and have a nice guilt-free day.